Hi, I'm Matthew Greger.
And I'm Nancy Greger.
We have this new podcast called We Should Probably Edit This.
But we won't.
Hi.
Hello.
So,
What is this episode for?
episode 4.
Episode
Yeah.
4. Okay.
You want to just make sure you lean into this a little bit. To talk.
Lean into
Yes, when you want to say something. So, hi. So, this episode's
What's
about,
the name of our podcast?
They already know it. So there's an intro.
can
No,
repeat
there's
it
an
again.
introduction to it now.
Oh, there's an introduction.
Yeah, we don't need. We can just go right into talking.
Oh, we can go right. Okay.
Okay.
Didn't
but
realize that.
We are.
But
We should
okay.
probably edit this.
But we won't.
Okay. So
Today's topic is what?
in-laws.
Ooh.
Guess they could be considered outlaws too.
Not necessarily.
No.
All kinds of in-laws, right?
Yes.
Father-in-law, mother-in-law,
Son-in-law, daughter-in-law,
sister-in-law.
all the laws.
All the laws.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. What a hot topic.
Well, I'm going to start off by just saying that we all come from different backgrounds and different ways of thinking, and we can't choose who.
You can't choose your family?
Yeah, you can't choose your family. And some families
Or
inherited.
the ones you marry into?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but we all come from different backgrounds, and sometimes we forget that when we have conversations, when we get to know people, when we get to know them,
I don't think it has anything to do with our different backgrounds. It's just the choices that your person makes is the choice that you make for yourself. It's not, I don't put into my mind when I married you, what my mom and dad were going to think or what my brother was going to think. That never even was a consideration. You don't realize that until you're married and you get interference or you get comments or you get other aspects to it. But who they are and how you were raised, I don't think has anything to do with the choice you made. We made a decision that we were going to get married, and
yeah, well, that's
my father and mother came into the equation at all. It wasn't up for them.
Well, no, it's not. It's not our consideration. I didn't consider your parents when I was dating you, and when we got married, I didn't make that a factor of, oh my gosh, I got to marry you because I have these wonderful in-laws.
No,
or not.
but
That doesn't play into it. However, when we do get married, there is a relationship that happens.
Well, it's a relationship that starts. It evolves because they don't know really you at all, just like your parents didn't know me at all.
Right.
They had ideas, and they may have had preconceived ideas.
Well, I think that goes back. I think that goes back to not fully understanding where you come from and your
You might have had some biases, and you may have had some other types of ideas as to where I came from and what I was all about. But time is really the discerning factor in all that. So let's in the beginning stages, your parents or your in-laws, at least from my point of view, there was an amount of respect for them, who they were.
Right.
What they brought to the family, but and our brothers. Well, your brother was much older. My brother and I are 14 years apart, so our brothers really played different roles in our beginning stages of our relationship and our marriage. But it definitely has evolved. And it definitely has changed a great deal.
Well,
and
in the beginning, you're just trying to figure things out, and before kids, it's just a matter of family gatherings that you're with them.
yeah,
When you have kids, you're hoping that they're going to be part of your life, that our kids are going to see the grandparents.
you would hope
Right.
that kids want to, your parents want to see your children when they're little and growing up. And that does play a role in how we were raised. I come from a Hispanic family where get-togethers were a given. There wasn't a choice. You got together for birthdays. You got together for holidays. You just got together. There was no question about it.
Well, that's your background, right?
Correct.
And that's what I'm talking about when the others don't understand it, because my background was totally different. We hardly ever got together as a family. I mean, I would say when I was younger, yes, because we were closer together, but we moved away from family.
Right.
So we didn't make the effort to go back under it's holidays or events or anything like that, because we were spread out.
Right. We weren't spread out.
Right.
At one point, I think we all lived in the same building.
So that makes a difference.
It does.
As you got older, when you were more spread out, your family still got together for events.
We got together pretty much up until my grandmother died. I would say we made it a point of getting together. My grandmother, on my father's side, being very, very much the matriarch of the family, who
Did she bring them all together?
She could command.
Okay.
She could command that you come together. She had that unapologetic ability to do that. And when you're young, and we were young, that just was the norm. It wasn't even something I would say to you was up for discussion. Because if we were here, I would say, oh no, this is where we're going. We're going to go see the family. And that wasn't a choice. There was no choice in the matter. That's what you did. Mm-hmm. The only exception would be is if you lived really far away, like you lived in a different country, in which case you were given some grace of having not to have to appear. But when she died, it was pretty much the end of that type of command. I don't think anybody
no one else
in the
stepped
family,
up to really take that role, right?
Nobody could really step up for that role. That was a role that was given to an elder. That wasn't a role that...
Right, but as the cycle goes through, someone else becomes that elder in their own sphere. It may not be the sphere of family that you had before, but now you have a different set of family, right? I mean, do you see that happening with you?
I don't understand your question.
My question is your grandmother commanded that amongst her children,
correct,
and those immediate ones.
Do I command that amongst mine kids?
Yes.
I have been known to do that. Yes, okay. I have been known.
Is it as successful as your grandmother? What?
Not always.
Okay.
Not always, but I think I'm slowly but surely also evolving into a situation where maybe it's not necessary, and instead of having everybody come here, maybe it's okay for me to go there. Maybe I will travel more to still have that connection with our children than I would
and grandchildren
and my grandchildren. How if my older son, who has predominantly all of my grandchildren, if he lived closer, would we be getting together more? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would we have our grandchildren more? Absolutely. There would be no hesitation for me whatsoever. But I do think it's good that they ventured off on their own. It's good that your children tend to go off and do their own things, that's what they're supposed to do. That's what you want them to do.
I mean, that's what we hope, right? We just want our kids to be happy.
But do I want my kids to come once a year to me? Absolutely.
But we also want our kids to marry someone, to have someone significant other that makes them happy and helps them excel as well.
Yeah, which is a challenge.
Which may not necessarily be what we think they should be. but we have to like remove ourselves from that because we can't choose for them.
Correct.
And
Which comes back to the original premise, right? When I said we decided to get married, we didn't really take into consideration our family, our parents, our brothers,
right,
even immediate cousins, first cousins. We didn't take that into consideration. We got married because we wanted to get married. And now you have kids and they're off doing their own thing and they're in relationships or they're married. And there is a sense of having to understand that boundary, understanding that this is what they have chosen as their significant person in their life. Do we agree with that?
It doesn't always mean we like it.
Well, I could look
Right.
at us. We've been married, 37 years, and it's your parents still
Yeah.
don't really like me.
Why do you think that is?
I think it is because I challenge their position. I think your father has a very old frame of mind of thinking of what a husband and wife is really about, and I think there is some form of how they were raised and how their parents treated them. That makes it very difficult for him to deal with somebody who
Well, I mean,
opinionated.
opinionated. Yes, you're very strong-willed. I mean, you come out and say what it is that's on your mind. You just get it out.
My children would say I was spicy.
Okay. My side of the family holds it in until we want to throw up sometimes. So which is worse and which is better? And the problem is that when you can just blurt it out, when I would hold back or I wouldn't say anything at all and let it fester and come up, I think that way of...
But I know it's festering, and I know it's festering you, and I know it's irritating you, and that causes its own dynamic between the two of us because I'll sit back and just say it,
Yeah.
what the freak? What are we? Why are we walking around on tippy toes? I can't do that really well, even with my own children and their significant others. I try, and sometimes
You have to summon your best.
Sometimes I'm good at it, and sometimes I'm not. I'd be the first to admit that. Interfering. You try not to, but sometimes that comes from a good place in as much as you've been around a little bit longer, you've seen little things. Your kids, unfortunately, don't think that you ever had a life or that you had experiences
Right.
that they are going through. Like, how would you know? Like, how would you know? How would you know? And I'm
You
kinda
don't know.
saying, you don't know. You don't
You
know.
don't
Because it may have not been a topic of conversation. But I think what's important is that if you're an in-law, if you have that title, and we all have that title,
Right.
if you have that title, it depends on where you're at, who you're around, and just being conscious of other people and what other people are feeling.
Well, I think everybody has a different point of view and a different center of truth of where we come from, right? And we need to open up and be able to try to at least understand what the other person's point of view is. That doesn't mean we have to agree with it,
Correct.
but we can respect it, and we can also, learn. Why is the thumbs up? I hope that didn't show up on the
It probably did.
on the.
I think that's the
video.
key word, respect. If you go into a relationship with the respect,
Wow, there's been a lot of times that we've been really disrespected by others. At times, there has been.
like an example.
Well, an example of me just trying to interject with a conversation, and then people have very strong opinions about certain things, and they
Yeah, they come hard and heavy. I get
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
You're not good with hard and heavy. I get it.
No,
I get
no,
that.
I'm not. I'm not, and I'm
And
not.
I'm
I'm
not
not. I'm
any
not when.
better.
I'm not when it comes to one of my children's significant others.
I'm not any better. The difference,
You may say something.
I
I
may
won't.
say something, but I would probably be the one person who could get into some serious trouble, to the point where it could escalate really fast, really ugly. So, however, the older I get, I tend to just kind of sit back and try to listen to where that
Do you let it
tone is
roll
coming
more?
from. I I don't. I may say something very calmly in the situation. However, when I'm out of that situation and that person is no longer around, we will have conversations about it and we will talk about it. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to talk amongst ourselves
Yeah.
in order to process.
Especially if we're traveling on the way back, that'll be the
It wouldn't
hot
even,
topic of the
even if we
conversation.
weren't traveling.
Right.
Once we were together and we were
Yeah.
by ourselves, it would be a topic of conversation between the two of us. And we would have to, number one, recognize, did that just happen? Did something just happen? And confirm that we both got the same. Because, sometimes your interpretation of one thing is not the same that I would have.
Well, and that's precisely the in-law problem, right? It's their interpretation of how you say something,
Yes.
or how you react, or how I react.
Yes.
That may not necessarily be what's really was intended.
Correct.
It's coming from the way we come from something isn't what they're used to. They're not used to that approach to a certain situation or a thing, and that I think, when you react to that instead of listen and try to understand, that's when there's problems.
Right.
It's that reaction, and it's the lack of understanding where you're coming from, or where I'm coming from, or where one of our in-laws are coming from.
I agree.
Whether it's a daughter-in-law or a son-in-law.
But I will say there was one advice my mother gave me when we first got married, and it was so to the point. And she basically said that whatever disagreements I may have had with my husband, never speak to his mom and dad about those disagreements. Don't ever bring them up. And I realized it was probably a really good thing, because I can remember that if someone was to complain about my children or say something about my children, I'd probably look at you and say to you, you don't have any right to talk to me about my kids. You have no influence in them whatsoever.
And you may only see that one little piece of
Correct.
Of them, and not have the whole picture. Right?
Don't cast any stones. And I've had that before, because my kids all of them have tattoos. And boy, that was a lot of backlash from my children having tattoos. And I they would say such negative things with people who have tattoos. And I would say, I raised some really good humans, and while they may decide they want to put some ink on their body, it doesn't make them any less of a good human.
Well, I think that's a really good description of outward appearance versus inward
appearance.
what you are on the inside. Just because you have something, whether it's the color of your skin, or whether you have a birth defect, or whether you have tattoos, it doesn't mean that's
Tattoos
who you
are different.
Well,
because tattoos, you chose to do it.
You chose the art too.
A birthmark on your body, the color of your skin, that's not a choice. That's what you were born into.
Right, but it's still an outward appearance. It doesn't necessarily reflect who the person is.
Agreed. But I can tell you that the tattooing and the body piercing, it got to the point where I would say, listen, the two things I always say to people: unless you've walked in my shoes, you can't comment on my life or the life that I have with my family. You are not me, And how you decided to run your life is up to you. It's like I always say, as a parent, you have the right and the ability to screw things up because that's your privilege. That's your right as a parent. That's what one of the aspects of being a parent.
Let's go back to your mother's advice.
So she would say,
why was that?
Because you, a mom or a dad, don't want to. They're always going to be in a protective mode when it comes to their children,
right?
And they don't want their children to be hurt.
I shouldn't be.
And they don't necessarily want you here. They don't want to hear your complaint about a aspect of them that you may agree with that. You may sit back and say, no, my kid is really like that, and I know that, but you don't want to hear that from somebody else,
especially somebody that
just got into the family. It was just married into the family.
Well, even after you've been married for many years,
But
your mom doesn't want to hear from me about something you did.
I think if you were to call my mother right now and say something, my mother, first of all, would laugh hysterically.
Yeah. Do you know what Nancy did? Can you believe this? She's driving me crazy.
She would. I think she would take a seat back. She would take a seat back.
She would know me by now. Like, that's Matthew's never done anything. Never.
Like
what's going on?
Something's wrong.
Then she'd be calling
me.
Right.
She'd be calling me and saying, "Why is your husband calling me and telling me about these things and complaining about something?" She would jump. She would jump. There's got to be a reason. Whereas I think if I called and I complained to your parents about you, I think they would. I think they would listen. I think they would try to be open-minded.
They would be surprised too, but they wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, they wouldn't know what to do.
Right, that's the difference.
They wouldn't know what to do.
Your mom would just react.
My
parents would want to think about it.
Yeah. Your parents would think about it. So that just kind of gives you an idea how we were raised, right? I jump into the water, get myself in, figure it out while I'm in there, sink or swim. I got to figure it out. Whereas you're going to sit back on the sideline and just see what happens.
Then I'll decide whether I'm going to jump or not.
Yeah, whether or not you should throw that life jacket in there, that life rope in there, and say, "Hey, babe, you think you need to grab that so I can pull you in because you went a little bit too far." That's the definition of the show.
I mean, there's been times that I've been around my kids and their significant other said, "Well, it's yours," And it's like that's your kid, and it's like it's more or less like, okay, well, why don't you say something to them? Why do you think that I as a parent should still say, if it's bugging you, you have that conversation with them. Don't tell me about it.
Yeah. You mean when parents no, they're not picking sides, but more like...
No, it's more like, well, we might be complaining about something, or we may observe something, and then the other person in the relationship will say, well, that's your son or daughter, said that.
Now I understand what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. And I tend to look and what's usually my response when I hear that? Well, I didn't marry them.
Right.
I gave birth to them, but I didn't marry them. Marriage is a choice. You choose.
And then you've got to have that conversation. You've got to have that communication. If it's bugging you, their behavior, then don't tell me about it or you about it.
Yeah.
Have that conversation with them.
Well, that's because somebody didn't give them that kind of advice. Don't complain. Don't complain about your significant other to their parent. It won't make any difference. Because I kind of sit back and say, I didn't marry them. Just because I gave birth to them doesn't necessarily mean I can control all the aspects of their life. Trust me, if I could, things would be a lot different. But I can't. And so they made those choices themselves. and you just got to go with it.
And I think the
Regardless.
choices that they make,
Sometimes it's really hard.
we have to also just say, hey, that's their choice. As much as we may disagree with it, or as much as we wish they would make a different choice, that could be with their partner or with something they're doing. It doesn't have to be an in-law situation. But we have to just realize, that's their choice, and also it's their consequence.
That's it.
For making that choice.
That's
with
your
it.
consequence. But you got to sit back and you look at those, the in-laws, and you just have to realize that when it comes to your children and their significant others, it's choices that they've made. There's something in that other significant other person that gravitates them to that person.
Right.
You don't know it because
they feel a connection.
It's not your connection, right?
Right.
And when it comes to your parents and that in-law type of situation, I still think it's a respectful mode. However, the older we become and the longer we've been together, I think there is a certain level of, this is what they do, this is what you do, and it's okay. I mean, look, it wasn't until just recently that, remember I told you what my mom did. My mom put she put a trust together, and in the trust she specified that if I should die before she does, my share of her estate will not go to my husband.
I mean, if
I die before my mother does.
Okay, right.
Her share, when she finally passes away, her share or my share of her estate won't go to him.
Of course not.
No, it's going to go it'll go to her 3 grandchildren. And she did that on my brother, for my brother, and she did that for me too. And it made me laugh because we were having a conversation about setting up the trust when I said to her, I go, oh, well, if something should happen to me, I meant to say it about my brother because my brother's a cop. And I said, if God forbid something should happen to George, then your half is going to go to Amanda. And my mother stopped and really paused for a while and said, no. And I said to her, I go, well, they've been married a long time. It is his wife. And she was like, no. So she decided that when she set up the trust that was what she wanted to do. And I can't. That's how she felt. I don't think it was necessarily disrespectful to you. I just felt I said to her, why do you feel that way? She says, well, Matthew can do other things. And he'll have other things that he can inherit. My stuff.
Know what that exactly means, but that's okay.
My stuff, I want my grandchildren to inherit it. So that was an interesting aspect to it all, which I thought was very funny, because when I told him about it, he was just like, "So if you should die first, I don't get." I said, "You get nothing."
So as we wrap this up, what would you give advice to your children's significant others? Is there any advice you would give them?
The same advice my mother gave me. The same advice my mother gave me. Don't call the other significant other's parent and complain about them, because it's number one, it's not going to help you. It's not going to give you any advice. It's not going to give you any insight to how do you deal with that individual. It's not going to offer you anything other than that parent becoming very resentful over the fact that you found a problem with their beautiful child, and that's not something that they want to hear, because you don't want to hear it either,
And my advice would be just try to get to know them, try to understand where they're coming from. I come from a different area. I may be saying something or suggesting something not as you're my children and I'm telling you what you have to do, but just as I just want to share something with you. I would love you just to listen to what I have to say and maybe think about it. It might be gardening tips. It might be talking about fishing. It might be personal growth advice, but it's not. Yeah, it's not to say, hey, you got to do this, but maybe we know something that they don't.
Well, see, that's the whole thing, is that technically, in the eyes of our children, we know nothing.
At times, I mean, I don't think that's always true, but when it comes to relationships and doing certain things, yeah, I think they think that we don't know what they're going through right now.
Yeah, if they are, and I get, like I said, you are in a relationship. What we would hope is that you would have seen the relationship that your parents brought you into this world in.
Well, that may not always be a good thing either.
No, it actually may not always be a good thing.
And they may be relating that to how they were raised and think that, again, not understanding who we are, they take their experience and expect that that's the way it is.
Well, it's like but it goes back to that original thought that I said. Every parent has the right to screw up their children's lives.
Right, but that doesn't mean your in-laws are the same as your parents. That's what I mean.
Okay.
You know. So
be kind to each other. Maybe that's the always the emphasis. What was that thing when they say once you're 18 or you finally leave home, the likelihood of you seeing that person starts to diminish? Like up until that point, that human's been in your life, you see them almost every day, and then once they're gone, you may see them once a year if you're lucky.
That's a hard thing as a parent to really
No,
get
so what
over
I'm
too,
saying
so.
is that because you're not going to be around and you don't see them very often, when those moments come up that you do, you got to really work hard at living in the moment, being in the moment, and being grateful for that moment, because they're not going to be around for very much longer.
If you look at it, let's say if you see somebody every year and you see them once a year, and let's say we're both 60 or soon to be, and that, so like if we were to live
to 80,
another 20 years, let's do 90.
All right, 90.
Okay,
30 years.
So 30 years, and we just see them once a year. That means we only have 30 more times we're going to see them.
Right? Reality about that is really, really strong when you think about it. You're only going to see them 30 more times before you die.
Right.
You know, it's kind
or
of
before
like,
they die.
Or before they die. Whoever goes first.
No,
you're
meaning what point you're looking at it. Whether we're looking at it from the point of our children, we're only going to see them 30 more times before we die.
Right.
Or if they look at it from us, they're only going to see us 30 more times before we die.
Right. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But just be kind to each other. Try to remember that moment that you're in, because it is far and few between. It's not like it's an everyday like when you were a kid. And I get you're not a kid, and I get they're not little, but enjoy those rare moments. Same thing would be when we go to see our parents. It's the same idea. You don't see them very often. You may talk to them often, but you don't see them very often.
Yeah, when you talk to them, it's not the same as seeing them.
No.
You know, and as they get older too, there's things that they keep from you.
They do.
That is.
And I would have to say that could also be true about your kid. What is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But until you're there in person, you don't really understand. You don't know.
You don't know.
No. So on that one, I'll leave it off of you just don't know.
You just don't know. So be kind.
So be kind and
be kind.
And try to love each other. Yep.
See you next week.
We should probably edit this.
But we won't.
Bye.
Bye.